Hey everyone, I'm Victor Dwyer, and this is the Mind Workshop podcast, and where we get experts and we get happy people, and we talk about their perspective on happiness and what it takes to be happy these days. Today we have Bob Priest on. Bob, thank you so much for joining, and he's going to go a little intro about who he is and how he got here, and then we'll dive into his perspective. Bob, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Victor. I've been excited to have this conversation with you, and thank you so much for the invite to your podcast, The Mind Workshop. Um, my background is 30 years plus in education, specifically a high school, middle school band director. I've also been an entrepreneur. I've owned a music store and some other businesses, direct sales, et cetera. So I'm pretty multifaceted. But that's been my background in a real quick nutshell. I've done a lot of things, but what I'm really excited about right now is sharing hope and faith through healthy lifestyles and just thinking differently about what we need to be doing for our bodies.
Yeah, let's go into like hope and faith because I feel like a lot of people lack lack that. So faith means a lot of things to different people. So can you go into what faith means for you? Because sometimes it means the spiritual, sometimes it means the universe, sometimes it means God. Like, can you go into a little bit what faith means to you?
Well, for me, I think the word faith is one of those ambiguous words. You say you have faith in such and such. In this case, a spiritual. I call myself a Christian. I try to practice that, and I have faith that tomorrow I wake up, and if I don't, then my faith is that I know where I'm going. So either way, tomorrow's a good day. So for me, faith is multifaceted, but from a spiritual perspective, I believe in a higher being. And I think for all of us, regardless of the God you follow or the spiritual path that you look towards, we need to have a higher thought process. We need to be looking to a higher thought process.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah,
And
I
it keeps
completely
me
agree.
happy. It keeps me happy.
And is hope and faith are they different things? Are they the same things? Like are hope and faith intertwined? What are your thoughts?
I think they go together. Hope is having faith for things that are unseen. I hope that tomorrow I get up out of bed and I get to see the sunshine. I have
Yeah.
faith that if I don't, I know where I'm going. When my time's over, my happiness and my faithfulness is that I know where my thought process is and my God is. And so, we have to have hope on every given day. I mean, think back, and I'm quite a bit older than you, but you're
Only a
hearing
little bit.
just a little bit, but you're hearing in this country today all the negative things. And so if you listen to all that, it doesn't give us much to hope for. But
Yeah.
if we go back many years, let's say World War One, World War Two, and what was going on in the world back then, and we hear older folks of today say, man, I miss those good old days. But if we look back, those good old days had wars, they had pestilence, we had plagues, we had cholera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't hear about that. So
Yeah.
what that tells me is that life continues to go on. And we still have things that are going on, like whatever the energy crisis is or whatever we want to focus on. But our hope is tomorrow's going to be better. Our faith is that that's going to happen. And we have to live that way, or we're going to live in a really dark world.
Yeah. And I always say that 1,000 years ago, we were eating moldy bread and drinking muddy water. Like I love like people are like, oh, I wish I was in the medieval time. Like, no, you don't.
No, you don't.
Like it was horrible. People would die, the Black Plague. Like it was an awful time to live. This is the best time to live, no matter what the news says or no matter what you're looking at. And it all comes down to the information you are feeding your mind.
Absolutely.
That's all the information your mind gets. So you are determining what particular voice you're building. Meaning that if you're listening to gratitude stuff, you're going to be building the gratitude version of yourself more. But if you want to listen to how much the world sucks, that voice is going to get stronger. That nasty, gross, toxic voice of how much the world sucks, that voice is what's going to be strengthened. So you determine your consciousness is determining what to listen to. You are deciding to turn on the news. You're deciding to turn into a podcast. Whatever you decide what information you feed your mind.
Yeah,
And then from there, your subconscious is going to work with the information you give it. So if you hate your life and you see that the world is burning and the world sucks, it's because of the information you're looking at. But if you see the world is amazing, it's also because of the information you look at. So depending on how you want to see the world, you just have to decide what information you take in. I don't look at the news at all. So like I am completely oblivious of what happens in news. And that makes it where I see the world in a positive light because I know that the negativity bias is a thing. I know that their goal is to try to trigger me to making sure that I look at the news, to keep looking at the news and make me angry. That is how the news is designed. It's designed as
absolutely.
a negativity bias. So me
Absolutely.
knowing that information, now I know is like, okay, this news is just trying to get me to get angry. And that pisses me off. And then I'm just not going to look at it. So, if you have that in mind, it makes it where you are a lot more conscious in your efforts when consuming information.
I agree with you. And I had a good friend that I interviewed on my podcast. His name was Terry Tucker, and he wrote a really neat book called Sustainable Excellence. But in one of his core principles, he says most people think with their fears and insecurities instead of using their minds. Learn to think critically. Control your mind, or it will control you. Your mind knows your fears, it knows your insecurities, identifies your vulnerabilities, and uses them against you. And
It's true.
that's just exactly what you said. It's what we feed our mind with. So I've chosen from a very long time, back when I was even in college, I started reading materials that lifted me up. I had friends that I hung out with in college that were good people that inspired me, that lifted me up, that encouraged me, not tore me down or made life tougher. And I think that's a big part of enjoying your life is being around people that enjoy life.
Yeah. And I think a big piece of enjoying life has some level of faith and hope. And I think because of that, you don't necessarily have to be religious, but you want to have hope in a goal or something and not rely on that as because of insecurity, but do it to have something to chase as well. And I think that's a fundamental part of happiness is to have that faith and hope underlying, knowing that because it gives you another level of purpose. So rather than me just going to my job every day and doing the same crap, then if you have a spiritual level or whatever it is saying, hey, I'm doing this because of my spirit flows through me or whatever it may be, that you're doing it for some higher purpose, it makes you feel better about what you're doing. So I think that faith and hope is a core piece of happiness as well.
Oh, I agree with you. And you hit a couple of things. You talked about purpose. And purpose is part of the equation. You have to have a purpose in life, and it's something that's higher than you. It's something that's bigger than us. When I was a teacher, I didn't like all the grunt work you had to do, but I loved the job. I loved kids. I loved watching the light bulb come on when a student got it, when they understood the concept or whatever. And so that was my purpose at that time.
Mm-hmm.
7 years ago, I had a stroke, and I was a runner and a cyclist, and thought I was in fairly decent health. I was on my 60th birthday, and that's not a good birthday number to have a stroke, but I'll never forget it. But
Yeah.
I had a choice during that time how to think through it, and to be honest with you, that kind of knocked me off my horse a little bit, but I still kept relying on my faith and having hope that I would be carried through. And with that, I started learning how to think differently because it did mess with my brain a little bit. And so I had to
Mm-hmm.
reprogram my brain and read more, but read differently, listen more, but listen differently. And today, 7 years later, I've started my own podcast. I have a couple of different things in the works that I'm just enjoying life. I mean, I just have a good time getting up every day and thinking about what today's going to look like. And so that's what hope and faith is to me. But that we talk about spiritual or religion, in every religious area you look at, there's usually pretty positive tenets to their religion. So we all have that. It doesn't matter who we believe in so much as that we believe in that
Mhm.
something, that there's a power higher than us. I don't believe we can look at it as we're just a big bang and we're here. That's too intricate for that. Life is just really, really too big to say boom and you're here. There had to be something higher than us. And so if we keep that in mind and keep our purpose in mind and have hope and faith that regardless what the news media is telling us or other people are telling us, the sun's going to shine tomorrow or it's going to rain tomorrow. Either way, I choose to get up and be happy about it.
True. And I think like consciousness is always such a huge gift that we're probably made up of five elements. Like 80 to 90% of us is just five elements. Like, so we're nothing different from the dirt in the ground, okay, when it comes down to the elements down there. And it's really amazing that we are nothing but this dirt in the ground, but yet we have this feeling of life, that this chemical equation that we are somehow built together, we should still be a robot, even though all this chemical equation comes together. But no, we feel alive. Like
Mm-hmm.
we are having this feeling of consciousness. We are more than just these elements. And
Yeah.
it's really amazing. And it gives you that whole other element of like higher purpose, saying, wow, like not only am I these elements, but I'm conscious. I have this feeling of life. Like, and I the way I see it is, even if I was conscious for a second and died, that would have been a good enough gift for me, because I got the feeling of 1 second of consciousness. The feeling I've gotten this long of consciousness is amazing. I'm so grateful to be conscious this live, because no other elements in the world have ever experienced this consciousness except the ones that I am in currently, this chemical equation that I have
Mm-hmm.
gotten. So all the rest of the dirt in the whole entire universe will never get to experience that the way I do. So I think it's really amazing that we get this filter of consciousness, the way to experience the world, because hypothetically we should be robots. We should be robots that just eat, sleep, and have kids. Like literally, that's what we should have been. But yet we have this feeling of consciousness and being alive, which is really amazing, even though we're just these five bags of chemicals.
Yeah, and you hit the one word that I really like hearing, and it was grateful. If we would just all get up every day and just be grateful for whatever the circumstance is before us, that moment we wake up. I'm grateful I put my feet on the ground. I'm grateful I got up and walked through the house. I'm grateful that I had food to eat today, whatever. And and the thing is you and I are, even though we have all those elements you're talking about, we should all look the same, act the same, and be the same, but we're not.
Yeah.
We're different than each other. We think differently. We react to certain things differently. Our minds go in different directions when we process, and that's again another unique difference about humans compared to many other mammals and stuff in the world. Is we have this capacity to chart our own path and to follow it and make choices. And that goes back to the faith piece for me is, we were given the choice to make a good decision or a bad decision. And
Yeah.
it's making the right decision. So, and if you make the wrong one, the good news is you can change your choice and go back to a different path. So that makes us, I think, much higher beings and gives us that ability to really chart our own course and everything as we go through life.
Yeah. And I become more grateful the more perspectives I start to understand. Meaning that a lot of people that are not grateful, they get stuck in their own mind. It's
Mhm.
all about me, 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 me. Like, oh, I can't believe they did that to me. I can't believe that happened to me. I can't believe this happened to me. And they repeat that over and over. But the more perspectives you understand that are not your own, the more grateful I feel like more people become. Meaning that if I see a homeless person on the side of the road, I start to understand the perspective, saying, wow, I'm really grateful that I have great mental health. I'm really grateful that I have enough money to eat right now. The more perspectives you understand and not judge, the more grateful you are. And like, for example, I saw this old guy on the side of the road. He's very difficult to walk. And I was so grateful that I have feet to walk with. and I was given two eyes, two like one, hopefully not two mouths, but two arms and things like that. Because a lot of people are not born with those things, and
Right.
the more I start to understand other people's perspective, I'm just so grateful for what I've been given. The fact that I was born in America is like the big one of the biggest things that like are like that we should always be grateful for. It's like one of the hugest things ever, because so many other places in the world you don't have anywhere 1% of the opportunities that Americans do. So I'm like there's so many ways to be grateful for. I can't even make a list on how many things I'm grateful for. That's how big the
And
list is.
man, and that's great, Victor, to hear you say all that, especially about the country we live in. This country was founded, several hundred years ago, and we're not flawless. We're human beings, and human beings are flawed. So, but we spend way too much time at looking at the negative things that are things that aren't going quite right, instead of looking at the ways to fix those things or to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. and
Yeah.
um, and that's where we focus too much on the negative rather than focusing on the positive and the how to. And so my message for healthy living and healthy lifestyle, whether it's food and physical, it's mental. And if we don't feed our mental thought process with healthy thought processes, we're going to run into deficits. And that's what's happening around the country today is we have people that are focused on the wrong picture.
Hmm.
And I hope that's why I was so excited to come on this podcast with you, is because you speak to that. And you're a young person and you're speaking to that. And I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think a lot of it is because of negativity bias as well, that we have an inclination to go more toward the negative than the positive in a lot of situations. And
Mhm.
when you start dialing on fears and insecurities as well, we're even more likely to go toward that negative aspect of things, of that we're not good enough, or I'm not comfortable with who I am, and things like that. It's a lot easier. There's a lot more people out there with millions of insecurities than the people that work on them. And that makes it where there's a lot more people that are negative and hate who they are, and they project that outwards, than there are positive people. It's just the way the world works. But you can always change that. Like there's always a conscious way to change that information by changing the content you listen to, becoming more self-aware, understanding that your thoughts are just thoughts, that you do not need to rely on them. The ego's job is to take the external world and fix it. Like that's that, like for example, when we were a kid, we said, I want that toy, and we would cry, and then once we cried, we got the toy. That is what the brain is designed. It's how we were
And then we
programmed.
didn't use it after we got it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that is how the ego is built. And we do the same thing. It's like, oh, I want that nice car, and I'm gonna work my whole life for it, and realize I don't even want the car. Like it's like exactly what you're saying. And it goes all the way through adulthood. But we have to ask why, and separate ourselves from that ego, and just realize that we are conscious beings. Talking about consciousness before, we consciousness is just the awareness of that ego. So if you don't have to listen to that ego and say, hey, I want that car. You actually don't want the car. Your ego wants the car. Your ego wants to feel good about itself. It wants that positive affirmation. It wants to feel validated. But
Yeah.
the conscious awareness, it doesn't feel anything. It's literally just the awareness of being alive. So just always be aware that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness of your thoughts. So
Yeah.
if you are hungry, you are the awareness of being hungry. You are not hungry. So you have the ability to change these things. And once you're aware of your thoughts, you can start to change them. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you. And I think the key word that you brought out was ego. Um, we all tend to we let our egos get in the way. And our ego will get in the way because I think Victor doesn't like me, and I uh, think about that constantly. And I go, Victor looked at me funny, and so he must not like me. And he didn't talk to me yesterday when I saw him out in town. And then you worked yourself up to that, and Victor didn't do anything. He didn't look any different than Victor looks right this minute.
Uh-huh.
But yet I'm the one that stews on that, and it's my ego getting in the way. And we let our egos get the best of us over so many things. And whether it's in marriage, whether it's relationships, we usually are the one individual is the one that creates his own problem. And, back when I first got married, I remember the toothpaste cap not being on the way I used to do, or the toilet paper was upside down instead of the right side up. And I would stew on that. And I'm sitting, here I am many years later, and I'm going like, that was so stupid. Why waste so much energy with something like that? And it was my ego because
Mhm.
I wanted to be right. And that's kind of in today's world, we've got to get out of our own ways so that we can move forward in what's going on, the changes in the world that are positive changes. Sometimes people hold back because it's not like it was yesteryear, but
Yeah.
we still need to have those positive changes because my life's a lot better today at 66 than it was when I was 20. And it was a good life at 20, but we didn't have computers. We didn't have calculator. Calculator was really expensive back in my day in high school, but now we've got computers that you carry around in your hand, that you can do anything you want to do. Here we are talking from wherever we are, and we're
Yeah.
not next door neighbors. And it's like we're sitting in chairs right here beside each other. I mean, those are great changes as long as we keep them in a positive way. So we got to keep our negative egos out so that we make positive changes.
Yeah. And if something ever bothers you, that's when you have to analyze yourself and ask why it bothers you.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, like I might really be bothered. I used to have an insecurity about being fat. So no matter how skinny I got, I would always think it to myself, I'm fat, I'm fat. So when I saw a fat person, it would bother me, and I'd be like, why? Why is this happening? And it's because of my insecurity about being fat. So no matter how much I worked out, I would always have that insecurity inside of
Mm-hmm.
myself. And if something ever bothers you, it's really important to ask yourself, okay, why? Like, how does that make you feel? And most likely, it's going to make you feel uneasy. It's going to make you feel insecure at some level, and the more you dive in and the more you pick apart these insecurities, the more peace of mind you're going to have. Meaning that I would have worked if I wouldn't have been self aware. I would have worked out my entire life telling myself, I love working out. I love working out 3 hours a day. And in reality, it was my insecurities that was driving the whole thing. So
Yeah.
it's really important to ask yourself why behind these things rather than doing them, because it's going to give yourself more peace of mind, and it's going to make it where you are able to really dive in, and you have to and find the things that bother you and let them go.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really got to have that nice car and it's really always being brought up, it's like, okay, are you thinking the nice car is going to give you validation to give you eventually love yourself, or are you just going it for the nice car? Most likely it's going to have something to do with love, self validation, or being validated by others. And you really have to ask yourself why behind those questions, because it's going to make it where you are going to have more peace of mind long term rather than working out your whole life, working your whole
Mm-hmm.
life, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, because you're never satisfied if you don't figure out that why piece.
Yeah,
You never become satisfied. It's an insatiable thing. And
true.
so, yeah, somewhere along the line in my life, I started realizing I didn't need this or need that. That was a crazy place for me to put all my focus and energy. And and again, I think it still goes back to those two words we started with: having hope for things unseen and faith for the things that will come. And that's where I live. And I think if we could sounds kind of simplistic. I know it's a lot harder than that, but if you focus on it on a daily basis, and you look at that higher power, if you give yourself the opportunity to grow through being around the right people, reading the right materials, et cetera, listening to the right podcasts or audiobooks or whatever, those things are going to feed your brain and feed your soul. And then when that's fed, then you're going to grow.
What are some strategies that people can do to have more faith and more optimistic about the future? And we talked about gratitude. Is there any other strategies that you have to really be more optimistic about the
One of
future, to
the
have that faith?
one of the things I do with my coaching, 'cause I do health and life coaching, and one of the things that I really talk about is making tiny changes, small atom-sized changes in habits. If listen to what's coming out your mouth. So if you first words out of your mouth is more of a negative slant, hear that, change it. I got out of bed and it's raining outside. Oh gosh, it's going to be a gloomy day. Oh, or you could say, man, I'm excited about this. My grass really needed that rain.
Yeah.
So having the right mindset is something that we don't always think that way. It's something we have to be mindful of. So I think the first thing I would do is say, always say something you're grateful for every morning when you get up before you do anything else. It doesn't have to be anything miraculous, just one little teeny thing. What am I grateful for? I'm grateful for my life. I'm grateful I woke up this morning. I'm grateful my feet made it to the floor and I didn't fall down. I mean, it doesn't have to be any wow thing. I'm grateful that the Lord has given me this beautiful day to go out my door and look at the beauty around me. But find one thing every day when you get up, grateful. I'm grateful for whatever it is that you're grateful for, rather than finding the negative. I'm going to be late for work. I spilt something on my shirt before I got out the door to go to work, whatever. Find something and laugh off when you have those upset times. It's not the end of the world. You know, when you're in traffic and it's not moving and you're mad at all the people around you, they're just as mad because they're not moving. So somebody has to sit back and go, can't do anything about it. Just enjoy the tunes on the radio. And when you get to that point in your life, you're a lot happier. I mean, I'm so much happier at 66 than I was at 56 because I've learned more and more and more about myself, of the things that I used to let bug me because I wasn't spending enough time being grateful.
Yeah. And a lot of things solve itself once you, the egos, as a kid, we gave the ego the job of,
Mhm.
I have a problem and I'm giving the task of my mind to fix it. That is the job we assign to our mind when we grow up. And once you give the ego and say, hey, your job is no longer to fix my issues. Like no matter how, if I fix my issues or not, if I once I get the $1,000,000, once I get the nice car, once I get the big house, I'm just gonna have more issues. Like that's it's designed to say, oh, what's gonna be my next issue? How am I gonna solve it? What's my next
Mhm.
issue? How am I gonna solve it? And that's all the ego is gonna focus on. But if you relinquish that saying, hey, your job is not to solve my problems anymore. Like it's okay. We need to have peace of mind. That's the problem we need to solve. And that's when you start rather than focusing outward, you focus inward on your
Mhm.
problems. Where you start saying, okay, rather than getting that nice car, okay, what am I looking for internally to make me feel that way? Am I trying to love myself? Am I trying to get loved by others? Like where am I going? And that's where you start looking internally at yourself and saying, okay, how can I solve this inside of me? And then that will actually, it's a little bit harder to do that, but it's going to long term, it's going to actually be able to solve it. And rather than going through the cycle of always chasing happiness and never getting it, because that's
Yeah.
most likely what you're going through right now. Of once you get the nice car, then you're going to want the nice house, then you're going to want to have the amazing wife or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And everything is never going to be perfect. But the soon as you start pointing your finger at yourself and saying it's my fault I'm not happy, okay, cool. Now let's go in and figure out why. That's when you can actually start making changes in your life.
And I think what you're saying is right on. And also the word contentment. We have to learn contentment's not a bad word. Sometimes people say you get too contented in something and then you're giving up or you're not being somebody that's moving forward and working hard. That's not true at all. We have to learn to be contented with ourselves. We have to be happy with this person right here. And once I'm happy with this person, all the external things around me become happier. I call it the critter brain. The critter brain is the part of the brain that is the fight or flight kind of scenario. It's what focuses on those negative tendencies. And so we get into our critter brain and we don't think at all straight. Everything that happens bothers us. It's just like you're talking. And I think ego is probably part of that critter brain. And it gets in there and it just messes with you and you can't focus. You're not contented. You're not happy. You're self-indulgent, but really all you're looking at is what you think everybody's looking at from the outside in to you. And once I became happy with Bob and whatever Bob did, said, or whatever, it didn't matter to me what was going on externally.
Yeah.
It just wasn't a big factor in my life.
Yeah. It's
So
really interesting. Oh, sorry.
No,
Where I was
I'm
going
done.
with it.
Yeah.
What I thought was interesting was every time I pick apart an insecurity, I become less and less motivated toward my goals. Meaning that it was most likely from my insecurity. Like, let's just use that workout example I used before. That like my previous self would go like, you're not working out 3 hours a day. You're a quitter. Like, what is this? But in reality, it was my insecurities driving the whole thing. Most of our work is designed behind the inner critic that judge us if we don't work, that
Mm,
criticize us if we don't work. Oh, like, oh, you're gonna become fat, you're gonna become your worst fear, or whatever it may be. And that inner critic is designed to keep us working. But once we kind of go through that and have self-love and have that inner peace inside, then we're like, I really don't need to work that a lot for my external stuff. Like a lot of other people say you're a quitter, like, oh, you don't work that hard on your business. You got to work 14 hours a day. But in reality, like I'm comfortable with who I am. Like it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter what that person says. Like I'm comfortable with who I am. I don't need to work 14 hours a day to feel good about myself. I feel good about myself right now. So it makes it where you have self-love for yourself right now without relying on that with your external environment. So it makes it where you don't have to work as hard because you're not pushing for that external environment anymore.
mhm.
So it's better in a lot of cases because I know a lot of miserable millionaires out there.
Absolutely. And, you know, to be honest with you, it goes back to the programming that we all have gone through. Back in my era of growing up compared to your era of growing up as a child, different programming went on, different belief systems were in place. And that programming and belief system is what drives us through that 14-hour days. I've been a workaholic the big chunk of my life, and look what it got me. I had a stroke because I was not only working hard. I was doing all this exercise and I was doing all these other things to keep myself from having the stroke. And lo and behold, it still happened. So, you know, we've got to focus on what makes. I'm happy. I'm happy with what I'm doing today. I mean, I'm enjoying this right now with you immensely.
Hmm.
I enjoy my podcast and my guests when they come on. And I never thought I would do that, especially at age 66. I didn't even know what a podcast was a few years ago, much less how did you do it and what's it all about and who's going to listen to me and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, I got to the point where I didn't care who listened to me. I'm going to do it for me. Here's the reason I'm doing it for me. Hey, out there, if you want to hear this, here it is.
Yeah.
And so that's why I call it the Bob Priest uh, show of life. I want to just enjoy life. So in my podcast, I talk about life and how to have a better life more abundantly.
Yeah. And that's so crucial. And what would be your one takeaway from this podcast if someone had to start implementing into their life to be a happier person? What would be their one takeaway that you would want them to start doing right after this podcast?
I think the first thing you need to do when you get off of this podcast is say something you're grateful for. Say something you're grateful for. Maybe tell somebody that you're grateful for them. How about going and looking in the mirror and saying, I'm grateful for you, the guy looking in the mirror? So I think grateful is one thing that people should take away from this whole conversation. I think number two is get out of yourself, your ego. That was a great point you brought up earlier, and it's one that I've really worked hard in my life to get out of myself and quit being so egotistical. And that really changes a lot of stuff about how I feel. And then last but not least is enjoy life. Just get up and enjoy life. Enjoy your job. Enjoy your journey. It's a journey. It's a long time. So you've got to pace yourself. And the better we get at pacing ourselves by the way we think, the way we talk, the way we act, the way we react, the loving ourselves, loving others, having hope, faith. You put all those things into a package, life's going to be a whole lot more enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And is there anything else that's been top of mind for you lately, either about the topics that we talked about or things that you've been seeing around that you wanted to talk about?
You know, being a life coach is just, I think people don't understand that people that do that kind of practice or holistic practitioners, People that do something a little bit different than the norm than what we're used to, there's a lot of value there. And the value is that it's somebody helping you think a little differently than what you presently do. If you're doing the same thing over and over and over and getting the same results, what's the answer to that one? It's called insanity. So if you're not seeing it, maybe somebody else can see it for you. So if Western medicine isn't helping you get some issues taken care of, because that's part of what I spend a lot of time on my podcast with holistic practitioners and alternative meds and stuff like that, people that have found other ways to cure some miraculous things to help make people's lives better without inundating them with just constant putting medicines down their throat. And the same thing's true with health and life coaches. They're looking for little teeny places in the cracks in your armor that need to be fixed. They're not trying to change you. They're not trying to make you eat cardboard for your meals. That's not the way it functions. What functions is helping you change little teeny atom-sized pieces, habit changes of your daily life, and still have fun and enjoy as you're going along. And so I think we need to get a different mindset of how we look at some practices and things that are going on around us that are really positive. They're really uplifting. They're really encouraging.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I totally agree with that. Well, that's all we have time for. I know we can go on for this for 7 more hours.
Absolutely.
Bob, please tell the audience how to find you, how to find more about your podcast, and everything else there.
Well, my podcast is the Bob Priest Show of Life podcast. I'm on Spotify and Apple, so you can go there and listen to me. Just my next episode drops Friday morning at 9 o'clock, and it was a great time with a well-known alternative holistic educator that's been around about 30 years. Some great stuff will come from that. You can reach me by going to bobpriest.life. That's my website. You can read my blog on there. My episodes from my podcast are on there. And always, if you reach out to me and we can just have a conversation. So just go to my website. You can get to me by that section. I appreciate you, Victor. You're doing a great work by just talking about positive, uplifting things. And I have hope and faith that your generation is going to have a big impact on this world.
Thank you. I love that. I love that. Bob, thank you so much for joining today. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This is the Mind Workshop podcast, and we'll catch you next time.